Yeah, brown bacon.
Hi, Robin. How's it going? Welcome to the Groundbreaking.
Hey, Deepak, thank you so much for having me here. Really excited to have a conversation with you today.
Uh, Robin, I'm super excited to talk to you. A big fan of the kind of work that you've been doing. Tell us a bit about yourself, the kind of stuff you've been doing, a little bit about your journey.
Um, okay, so I think I'm an accidental designer. Studied in computer science, had a typical ID job that I started, and somehow uh, uh, life happens, and I am a founder of a product design agency today. I run this company called Parallel, and we work with right from governments to large companies to Bay Area startups. I think work with a bunch of different companies doing digital product design.
Yeah, I saw that you were an engineer at one point. What? How did that shift happen from you turning from an engineer to to someone who was like consulting and doing design for like big tech companies?
So I think when I was an engineer, when I was studying engineering, I did a couple of internships. I used to I was really pumped about startups and how they build products. This was back in Pune. Every weekend I used to hang around with founders trying to build stuff, even when I was in college. And the whole idea of building products and companies was something very exciting for me. Uh, but I think what happened is I got a very standard ID job. I was supposed to be testing XML files. That doing Finnish language. That was my first job. Uh, my friends, people, mentors, everybody told me that you're really good at defining problems and defining a direction for that solution. Building it easy. Once somebody comes and defines what exactly the problem is, how do you solve it? Building it is much easier there, right? And that was a feedback I was given again and again, but I never knew what to do about that. I never knew there are design schools. I never knew what to teach. No clue. And then something very interesting happened. I was doing a brief internship before my full time job uh, with this person called Unmesh. I think he's just come back from US after setting a company, and I think I was lucky to work with him even before he had clarity on what he was building. And one fine day, he gave me a book and said, you should read this. And that book is called, I think everybody in design would have heard about that. It's called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. And this is 2009. Uh, I read that book, and every page I read uh, spoke out loud to me. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. Everything around me is broken. Products are broken. Uh, Things that we use every day to get our jobs done are broken. In fact, I had a deep inclination towards fixing government tech back then when I was reading that, because that was the biggest thing that we all saw was broken. And that's how the journey started. That's what inspired me to pick up design. And here I am, I think 15 odd years later.
Yeah. So it was basically your interest in just improving product and the whole experience. And I think you spent some time working with the, designers as well before you kicked off your own practice. Tell us about that. Do you think that was a major shift to, that kind of kicked you off in a way to, to start your own?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think which is why I say it's very accidental. I read the book. I was very excited, but there weren't enough design schools. It took me a while to figure out for how do I go from here. I think those are days where we did not have information and resources available like we have, whether it's ChatGPT or courses or YouTube or everything. So it's like, what do I do next? And I met my first job was an tech job where I was doing software testing. In my second job, I happened to work in a very unconventional place. It was actually a government institute where I happened to work in their digital marketing team. That's supposed to own some products. I started managing their website. It was bizarre, right? And did that for a while. And then I was like, I need to start something of my own. And uh, and I made a list of things that I wanted to do. And one of them was to start a design studio. Uh, but that was last on my list. There were many other ideas. So I had a very good friend, Abhishek, who was the founder at Opposite now, at that time, Arabia Design. Um, and he was also somebody we were working with in my job. So I said, let me take a couple of days and spend some time in Goa, think think about life, think about what I want to do. Uh, so I just took a flight, spent a couple of days with him, hanging around there. What do I want to do? And then he offered, see, look, you. We striked on every single idea on that list that I had, apart from the last one of starting a design studio. And and when we landed up there, Abhishek told me, see, this is what it's turning out to be. Why don't you help me build one? And then you figure out if that's something you want to do. Like, take 80% responsibility. Taking 100% responsibility is hard. Why don't you take 80% responsibility? Help me build something. And yeah, come here. I was like, oh, wow. Anyways, first it's Goa, then a design studio. I get to learn and build something. So it was very exciting. So that's how that happened. And I think that's the place I spent a lot of time, learned foundations of brand and visual design, something that, you don't get to learn enough if you've not been to a design school. So I learned a lot of that firsthand there, taught myself digital, taught myself UX, things were coming in. Funny enough, I think when it comes to digital UX and processes around there, uh, I've never had somebody handholding me and teaching me how to do that. It's something I've just figured out on the job. But I was really lucky to have got a deeper learning around brand and visual design in my job there.
Yeah. I think starting your own, not a lot of people talk about it, but like starting your own practice as a, especially a design agency, I think it's maybe like 40% is about design, but like majority of it is just building business. How did you manage that? Were you also a person who knew how to make businesses?
See, I'm a Sindhi, right? I come from a family of people building businesses there. That's what I've seen growing up always. And you always have that itch of building one when you're growing up. But having said that, I think building a business is less about your capabilities, intelligence, and more about sometimes a bit of illusion, sometimes a bit of risk-taking appetite, sometimes thinking that I'm just gonna be able to do this. Because that's where 90% of people struggle, that they just find the whole idea of building one so intimidating that they never start one. So I think if you have a bit of delusion to start with at that point of time, I'm not saying it confidence. I'm saying it delusion very cautiously. Yeah, because ultimately you might end up building something, but not exactly the way you thought, right? Not exactly in the time you thought. Not exactly maybe to the scale you thought. Things would turn out very differently than what you assume. So I would say it's a bit of delusion, a bit of guts. It's that ability to take risks. It's that aspect of not taking EMIs early on in your life. Uh, and then it's simple. I think you just keep learning, keep optimizing every day. You keep figuring out how to do things, right? And every day, every week, every month, every year is about figuring out something new on how to do things. And then it just eventually adds up over a period of time and you have a business, right? I think that's how I see it.
Yeah. How difficult was it to find first few clients?
I think I was really lucky. It was not that hard for me. I don't remember doing outreach for work more than 1 month, first 1 month, ever in my 11 years of career, roughly career.
Oh, that's a big stage.
We have never done outbound still. I just reached out to a couple of. So I think the first offering was not exactly design. I thought that I've understood design. I understood tech. Let me help people who do design and bring them closer to tech. So I think the first company, and the company name was actually called Code Paddle eventually before we renamed it. The idea was to bring design and tech closer. And we used to do design focus. We do design focused front end developers. Most developers don't understand design. They don't pay attention to detail. It's just about functionality. Like both are important. We bring them together. That was also originally the inspiration for the name Paddle. How do you bring design and tech closer? So I just reached out to a couple of people who were doing design, and we got some really good assignments where we started doing front end. But eventually, 6 months down the line, I felt 90% of people were doing really bad design. So I said, I don't want to work with people who are doing bad design. We'll do design ourselves. And that was another iteration of figuring things out and evolving. But I think I was very lucky to just have first few customers come on a platter, and maybe around that point of time, digital products and startups were just picking up in India and Bangalore. Maybe it was the right decision to just move to Bangalore than any other place. In fact, I know that after I quit my last job, I was just sitting in my home and saying, where do I move next? Should I go to Delhi? Should I go to Pune? Should I go to Mumbai? Should I go to Bangalore? I think at that point of time, Pune and Bangalore were not that different 15 years back. But maybe it's just about being at the right place, right time, doing good work, and things happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's kind of awesome to hear, and also very rare. And then a lot of referrals. One thing led to another. Is that something that has happened?
Yeah, I think beyond that, after first few customers, it was just referrals because design, now we have a lot of people, but it was a sparse talent. I also, again, coming from a tech background, I built a website and did some SEO before even having capabilities. And maybe thanks to my previous digital marketing work, I knew how to run ads. I knew some of those things. So I think basically some groundwork, a little bit here and there in the first 1 year, but referrals are what has kept us going. I think we grew to a 40 people team without any marketing and sales function. It was all about good work and referrals, and that's what kept us going.
Yeah. Why I emphasize on that was basically like like in my 4 years of journey and running a creative business, I've seen so many people closing down their agencies, closing down their practices, and lately, in fact, a lot of freelancers are going back to the job because I think I think the big problem is the sales problem and having not enough client and consistent client. I think that's the thing with service business, to have like consistently, getting clients.
So that's why it's a delusion, right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing, right? Everybody is starting with a delusion. I can do it. I can design really well. My clients love me. I can build an agency, right? Maybe I also startups like that.
Yeah.
So it's nothing. But the idea is how many of them can back up that delusion or illusion with grit, resilience, building new skills, learning how to sell. Like I just tell you a story. I think in 2017, I was excited about how designers can do more than just design execution, do a lot more strategy, help companies build successful products. And I traveled a lot to understand how product innovation was happening. And I learned design sprints there. I studied, did workshops directly with Jake Knapp, who's the author of the book Sprint. And I'm sitting in a room and I have McKinsey consultants sitting next to me with 20 years of experience. They're all saying, we want to learn innovation. We want to see how to get teams to solve problems and collaborate well and all of that. And I came back to India. I ran a couple of sprints. Initially, I did first couple of them at almost like just covering a cost, right? And created massive value for people because I was learning something new, cool, very powerful, right? But I think for almost a year, I couldn't sell it. Something so powerful that can help people cut down 6 months of work into a couple of weeks, it just couldn't sell it. So I think it's part you have to figure out the skill to help people figure out what they need to do, right? And then I think the second bit is also about the market, like what is the market maturity? And I think when you talk about a lot of agencies shutting down and people struggling to sell, it's part building capability on business, which is how to sell, how to market, how to get customers, how to negotiate, whatever, everything. But I think I would say at least 50% or more of that is also a function of the market that we operate in. I think we are in a market where design still not always is perceived as value. It's perceived sometimes as a necessity or a cost. So I think that's the reason why that's a story with a lot of us. I keep talking about this, and I think that's something we've been discussing in the team. Why there isn't a IDEO or a Metal Lab or S2 or something out of India yet? Why there is none? why every design firm, even the ones who are doing really well and the ones who have exited, and I know about some of them, they've all struggled in terms of financially, in spite of doing really cutting edge work, in spite of working hard. I think it's a function of market as well. It's as the country evolves, like economy grows, uh, AI shifts dynamics whereas it's not about features anymore. Like when good products are not about features anymore. Uh, uh, I think there will be need to bring designers in the room more than ever before we've seen, is what I believe. So I think it's just about timing sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, designers deserve to be in boardrooms, but I think as you mentioned that it also uh, having a skill of adaptability. What I wanna know from you is that how you've been doing it for almost a decade, right? That's a long time. What are the foundations that have changed, or you think overall in your processes and how you've been working with clients? What are the major shifts that you've seen?
In the last 1 or 2 years or generally?
Yeah, I mean, generally in last 5 years, especially post COVID, I'm sure like there's some like insane groundbreaking changes that have happened.
I think one big thing that has changed is the pace at which products are being built are accelerating by the day. And I've seen that acceleration happen over, of course, this decade. And that changes the role a designer plays or a design firm plays in the mix, right? So I think I think now the examples are changing, and now when you're asking, I remember, like, I think all of us would remember growing up, products like Adobe and Windows would launch a version every 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
Windows 97, 2000, and then 2005 or Vista and all of those, right? Every 2-3 years, there will be a big version that comes up and we'll say something new has happened, right? And then we started seeing everybody move to incremental releases. Of course, there are some big releases that come, but like often you just even lose track of that. Like you would not know when was the last time your iPhone or your MacBook was updated. Like you would not have track of that. What new features came in? Something new came in, you notice, but it's not like a big thing. Like so, we started moving to frequent updates and but the frequent meant every few months, right? And then I think what we're seeing is that happening every, like Agile talks about 2 week sprints, right? So you say, and that's how I've seen working with a lot of clients where they release every 2 weeks. And that was great for me. I think if the company is following Agile and they're releasing in 2 week sprints, like, oh, these guys are good, right? And now I'm seeing something very different. We recently worked with a customer uh, who releases every week. Every Friday they release. On the weekend they collect feedback. Monday they come back and say, what are we going to build the next week?
Is it like a B2B product?
It's a SMB product, SMB DIY SaaS product, right? And I've been talking to many other companies, especially in Bay Area and the Valley, and I've heard companies doing as much as 250 releases in a year, right? There's another client we're
That's
working with.
insane. That's like one every week, right?
No, not 250 releases a year. So that's about 2 to 3 a week. Right. So in fact, I recently started working with a client whom I said big releases. He said, no, that's too much. We release every alternate day or stuff like that, right? And I don't know. It's hard to say how much is too much.
Yeah.
But I think if there is one big thing I've seen changing in how products are being built, is the pace at which they're being, pace at which iterations are being done. And that is the single most factor that affects how designers collaborate with product teams, right? Now, that leads to two interesting situations there. And I think that will also help me bring forward how we approach design. And I think that's something that I've been a big fan of. What I've seen in the market, wherever designers work in a fast operating environment and a resource constrained environment, typically the default with all companies that are doing good work, right? You'll always have less resources and you're shipping reasonably fast. Whether it's once in every 2 weeks, once in a month, or whatever, right? Anything less than that, right? But still, that's fast enough. Designers complain about being on a treadmill. Right? They say, I just don't have time to sit and think. I don't have time to follow my process. I don't have time to frame problems. I don't have time to research. And I think if there is one fundamental thing that I disagree with is that more time leads to better outcomes. I think more iterations lead to better outcomes. And that's coming from, like, in spite of being a design leader and running a design firm, I'm often on the side of startups and businesses where I say, I don't agree to this. And I think you can follow a process despite all constraints. And if there is one thing that I've heavily evangelized in my team and coached them is how do you follow a process within all the constraints you have, right? How do you frame better problems? How do you define jobs to be done? How do you think divergent? How do you do your quick research? In spite of all the challenges you have, in spite of all the constraints you have, the process and the time you give will vary, but you can't say that, you can't keep complaining saying, I'm not being given the right amount of time to do good work. And which is where I think one final thing around that is that designers have to start shifting towards saying, how do I create value? And business has to move fast. You can't say this doesn't fit in my process. Businesses have evolved, and you have to evolve with that. And that's one thing that we've been really trying hard to coach, evangelize, and cultivate at Parallel.
I think delivering things at the right time is also an essential part of the process that not a lot of people talk about, and knowing when to stop. Right.
Knowing when to stop is a big thing. Yeah. But otherwise, we just love rabbit holes, right? Design is never done.
Yeah. It's like a, I mean, if you ask a designer's dream, it just, they just want to spend like 6 months just building their portfolio. And that's how they try to treat like the kind of work that they do. Robin, so I just want to directly dive into, our conversation, that little conversation we had, and you talked about that you are kind of in a space where you're working with like two different worlds now. Like you're working with the government. So one question for me, like even in my community, and like whenever we have a chat, like bunch of designers, we just talk about how shitty are these platforms, considering, and for some really important tasks, right? In order to register identifications and whatnot. There are platforms by the government, trying to give you tenders and whatnot and stuff like that. Um, I understand that, okay, there are so many. I mean, this conversation ends where, one person says that, oh, there's so many people in our country. What's actually happening? Like, I just want to know your experience.
So it's a very, very interesting and a very personal story, which is where I have evolved in my thinking about it. If I just go back, I think it all started with designers often look for meaning, right? And of course, you have your cool things that any job brings in, any work brings in. Am I doing cutting edge work? Am I solving interesting problems? Am I making enough money and all of that, right? But then ultimately, you also sometimes, and many of us question for meaning. Am I creating the most impact I can? And that was the kind of question that I started asking myself 5 years back, especially given I had worked in a government setup in my early careers, and my journey started by reading a book that the only thing I would think of with every page I would turn is how, like you said, shitty all this government tech was, and many, and to big extent it is, right, even now. And so I think I had a laundry bag at some point of time which says, there was a quote on it. It says, it's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it.
Us.
Right.
Very well said.
Right. So I think basically the thought process was that all of us can be armchair activists and complain about things that we don't like, whether it's government tech, whether it's potholes on our roads, or it's the security or whatever, every challenge that you have in the society that you live in, right? But nothing moves if you just sit and complain about. Somebody has to try and do something, right? So I thought, let me give it a shot. And let's see. It was an experiment, right? And fortunately, the first experiment where we worked with DigiLocker, I just loved working on with the team.
Yeah, it's a really interesting product, first of all.
Yeah, it's so basically, again, there are so many stories, and I sometimes feel like it's all just scripted. how all of this work has happened, but a very fun story on that. And tell me if those stories are not that relevant. Let me know. I'll get to the point sooner. But I think what happened is I went to I was going to Delhi, and I was at the Bangalore airport, and there was a friend coming with me, and this is 2019. Uh, Before COVID, before DigiLocker was a thing, I did not even know about it. I'd never heard of the product. So I had actually forgotten my wallet. And you could not, that point of time, enter the airport without showing your original ID cards. Like those, like originals meant physical, printed.
Yeah.
I was with a chip, right?
Yeah.
And I was not carrying that with me. And my friend said, "Oh, have you heard of this app called DigiLocker? You can get inside with the ID." And especially at airports, they accept it. If there's only one place today in 2019 where they accept those IDs are the airport. And they go, let me figure it out. Thankfully, I was a little early for my flight, which very rarely happens, but I was really early for a flight. It took me 15 minutes to sign up and get my, I think, Aadhaar or driving license there back that way. I boarded the flight. I had mixed emotions. I was grateful. Oh, wow, there is such a thing exists that could give you a flight. Just 15 minutes to just get my ID. This is horrible, unacceptable. So I landed and I said, who's the team behind it? What are they up to? Right. And when I searched about it, I found that Amit Ranjan, who was earlier the co-founder at SideShare, was a consultant with them. So I shot a cold email to them and said, look, this product is really bad. It's really powerful. I'm going to help you design this for free. Let me fix it. And they said, okay, let's do that. Somebody has to take that initiative. And I got them into a WeWork in Gurgaon. I said, we're not going to do this at your office. You need to give me 2 dedicated days. I need the senior most members of the team, clear the entire calendar, sit with me for 2 days. We run a design sprint. We'll figure out the problems you have. We'll solve them. We'll prototype them. We'll test them. And we'll make it a better app. And those 2 days, I just loved collaborating with them. They're smart people. Unlike what a lot of people think, it's just hard to work in that system. But often some of the, most of the government officials, people who are working on tech or anything for that matter, are very intelligent, very smart people. Like, that's something that I realized for the first time. And they implemented half of the things, not 100%. They implemented 50 to 60% of stuff that we did within the next 3 to 6 months. That was fast. And they shared metrics that were moving like anything. Our retention rates were moving, our onboarding was moving, some of the metrics were moving multiple times. It was crazy, and I was pumped. I never thought that we could do that, but from there it just happened. I think we started getting more requests. We were excited about the impact we could do. We kept doing more of it. I think if you just look back at the last couple of years, it's been one of the most rewarding work we've done. But also, I think a lot of that has been our CSR, possibly, where we've not got tenders, we've not got big money, anything. Somehow, some places we've covered costs, some places we've done it pro bono, a lot of places.
Yeah.
But I just thought we should do it. It's like something I guess to do that. And things change when some people do it. Like, for instance, last year I was at a conference where the CTO at Digital India, he was saying on stage that that one workshop on DigiLocker opened up my perspective to design. And now design is a core part of the...
Wow.
Like 5 years later, they have...
That's priceless, actually.
Yeah, 5 years later, government is running a UX conference for all their employees, right? And the person driving it says that, 4 or 5 years back, we ran this workshop and that opened up me to design.
That's a great story.
Crazy. Like, and it can just bring, you feel like I've created some real value, right? Where it's not about one product, one experience, but you're helping influence an ecosystem. And that's priceless to feel as a designer, right? Of course, okay, you can say that I lost a little bit of money-making opportunity for a few years or whatever, but that kind of impact is priceless, right?
Yeah. I mean, and not everything is about money. Some things, like one thing leads to another. And I think the kind of case study, the experience that you built is gonna, work like a magnet for you, for sure.
It is. Has it been
already?
It is. Every single day. I think we might be working with them again, hopefully soon, but the last round of work we did was in 2020. And still half of the job applications I get, so many of our customers, everybody talks about what we do to digital. Like, and the only thing I got is that, okay, we're going to do this for free, but we're going to have brag rights. We're going to talk about what we did. We're going to share how you can even work in a system like a government tech system and still drive innovation, still drive product. And yeah, it's paid off.
Do you have any, plans to reach out to more folks in the government?
See, right now, my thought is we've done enough to evangelize and do a bit. And people who are serious about doing it, people who want to do it, uh, if they ask two people, for sure, at least one of them or at least both of them might point them to us. So I think we've done our job. Now it's on them. If they're serious, they have to come and they say, we realize the value. The education bit is done. Evangelism is done. There are enough case studies now in the ecosystem, not just with us, but many other people have done work on many different products. So I think we've done our bit as an ecosystem. I'm not just talking about me, but many other people who work with, and I think many of them have done good work. We've done our bit to educate and make people aware. Now it's on there.
Yeah. That's a great leverage for sure. And so I mean, so I've spent some time living in France, living in Europe, and I've closely experienced their products and around the government, like the things they were doing, conferences, products, weather apps, stuff like that. And it was so very well designed. And again, I think it'll be unfair if I compare our ecosystem to them. But at what point we are kind of giving more value to design? And I mean, I kind of know why is it happening is because we have maybe bigger problems. But at the same time, the way we are evolving is something that's I think concerning. Or maybe I'm missing a lot of great things.
Yeah, I have last year I went to London for the first time and I had the same observation. And I've been observing the work of gov.uk for a long time. I think that set benchmarks for what government tech could be, right? And I thought about things the way I think what you said, right? It's concerning. What should we do? I have got to realize that ultimately, maybe I could be wrong, but I think it's just about our capability to spend the money. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not enough. And what happens is we are a very cost-conscious economy, and I think, and even I think it changes on what citizens have to come forward to demand more. I think last year I was doing audits of certain government products, and 80% of the products had 4-star plus rating on Play Store. I was like surprised. Like they were horrible products with 4-star plus rating. And when I read through the comments, people are happy that it's functioning.
Yeah. The sensors are very low, actually.
Yeah, most people are saying, oh my God, this is amazing. I can do this sitting at my home. I don't have to go to it. And it's hats off to the government or XYZ department to build this kind of app where I can sit at my home and do this. Now they're going to say, we are getting 4-star rating. I have 4.5-star rating. We don't need to do anything. The standards are low. So it's also a transition of the aspirations of the society, right? We are a society where we are still working at the bottommost layer of the Maslow's hierarchy as a society, right? And even if you look at products that for us sitting in Bangalore, no product talks about 90% of products are all about cost efficiency, offers, discounts. That's what drives. And I was when I was walking around the streets in London, I don't remember a single billboard or signage that spoke about discounts or anything. Very rare. In the underground, everywhere. It was just expression of what problems they solve and how they are great. But if you look at India, it's the opposite. So design will never be a priority until, like, what is the lever for driving the business forward? Is the lever for driving the business forward the experience? Or it's the cost and value? Until it's cost and value, design will be in the back foot. It will be cost and value. It will be a working, reliable tech where things get done. Then it could be marketing to bridge the message, and design. Okay, experience. Who cares? Like most people are just like, why should I care? What is the ROI? Is it a competitive edge? Is it is it something based on which I can differentiate? So I believe that design will get its due importance in India only as the economy improves, only as a society we demand more. We move from the basics of life to increasing our aspirations, where we ask for more, where there are multiple products competing, which is happening by the day. And eventually they'll start competing on experience and not price. The day we start making choices which are not on price and on experience, that's the day design will get established. I definitely feel India has some of the best design talent in the world.
Yeah.
And what's restricting, I think businesses are not making the best of that talent available. Either they're not hiring them, or even if they have them, they are massively underutilizing that talent,
Yeah.
and they're wasting that talent what they can bring to the table.
Yeah, that's true. I also feel that it's the awareness from the top. I think leaders need to understand the value first, and then it just follows. I also, super interesting. You mentioned that majority of your clients has been Indians, and like I keep talk. I'm also in a space where I'm trying to get attraction and trying to grow. You know how it goes, and you have to consistently come up with things, and maybe what was working 5 years ago won't work today. So and in the process, a lot of people just like uh say that, okay, oh, find a client from US, bring a client who's in the West that pays you for your time and pays you well. But at the same time, I think it's an unpopular opinion that you also just talk that it comes it comes at a cost, and there are a lot of things that are not in your control. Could be the time. What I've noticed is that if they are ready to work with you in a totally opposite time, like 12 hours, then they're most of the time they're just working for you for cost efficiency. um like tell us about that. I mean, how did you find like and I think you recently started working with US clients. Tell us a bit about your journey and relationship with your clients, what kind of clients you've been working with.
That's that's an interesting question, and I think like I was sharing with you in our chat before that these last 10 years, if somebody tells me to define Sharply or ICP, I don't think I can. We work with early stage India startups, we work with scale ups, we work with banks and large organizations, we work with government. We've done some work with Meta and Google. And lately, last 6 to 8 months, finally, I've started working with a lot of Bay Area startups. And for the longest period of time, I think for both reasons. One is the proximity and the collaboration that you can do sitting in Bangalore. You can work with people together, and you can unlock a very different kind of collaboration, whether it's design sprints, whether it's so many other possibilities of collaborating closely. And I think I also had a very strong bias, or I would say love for trying to do more for India. And I thought that working again, the whole are we working with people just for more money? Is it just about cost? Are we going to work with good customers? Do I want to stay up late nights and talk? Those are questions even I had in mind, and I never even tried doing this for a very long period of time until I reached the conclusion that it is going to take a long time for us to have enough design maturity, right? I think I've shared with you, I started running design sprints in 2017, and in 2025 also, most people don't get the kind of value you can derive out of uh, very powerful collaborative processes like those, right? And then I said, let's experiment. Let's try this also and see what happens, right? And last, I think maybe 6 to 9 months, we worked with about 5 US startups. Many of them have worked in very interesting companies in big roles. Like one of our clients was a very senior product leader at Dropbox area. There are a couple of others who come from Stanford, serial entrepreneurs, stuff like that, but trying to start their own business or something new. And something very surprising is I have noticed, which has been a very sharp contrast, is that how much they value design and how much the value design shows up in them bringing in their tech teams to do design reviews, saying you need to understand this and immerse here, right? Or being very active participant in the entire design process, appreciating the what goes into making it, vocally calling out and celebrating contributions of designers, right? Not just internally, but even externally. Recently, we closed the project and the client sent did a small farewell, sent a cake to the team or stuff like that. We really value you. I think almost all these 5 customers have gone publicly and shared about their work on LinkedIn. I work with this team just after working with them. They have shaped a product in a ways we could not imagine, whatever stuff like that. And in 10 years, I have not seen a single Indian customer do that. Maybe 100 of them. 5 of them, all 5 of them internally, externally are valuing what we're doing.
It's the culture.
It's a culture. I think it's both. It's culture of appreciating somebody creating value for you. I think that it's a bit nuanced. One is it's a culture of appreciating value creation. Second is they understand the value designers bring in and how it's important for them. Third is how the businesses look at their what they're trying to do, right? I think there's this concept of cost optimization versus value maximization. When you work with a US customer, they're focused on value maximization. How can we, like, I think there's a very interesting analogy. You can say this. The thought process is how can 1 + 1 be greater than 2?
Yeah.
Right? How can you make it bigger than the both of us individually, right? How can you create a deal where both of us feel happy and putting in our best to make something bigger than both of us, right? Versus I think here, and again, I've done so much for this. I feel very, very strongly about what we have done and what we should do for our country. But I do feel, I think the thought process needs to change a bit. Here, it's a lot about squeezing value.
Yeah.
How can I squeeze as much as I can, even if it makes you feel squeezed,
Yeah.
and if it makes you compromise the kind of effort you want to put in?
And that's a prerequisite. I mean, that's like the basic the treatment that you get. Another is also like, I think companies are secret about, this, like, we've only been working with our team and we should not be talking about that we are working with an agency or like an external partner. It's the purest mindset. I really don't understand.
I think maybe it's a function of maybe 80%, 90% of design firms, agencies in India are not doing high standards work. I tell this to my team often that when we talk to a client, we're not competing with any other agency. We're competing with the perception of working with an agency.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I get so much hate. No, you have not. Whenever, I mean, it's like that's like the basic conversation is that, okay, they're looking for options, oh yeah, you are agency guys, stuff like that.
The conversation is not about what can you do for me. Exactly. Like we are talking to 4 other people and we thought we should let you know. And what can you do for us before we start working? How can you prove us you are really good? It's like, what a I just stop those conversations right there and say, we never pitch. I think so far at Platter, we don't pitch. And I say, yeah, I'm happy to explore how we can create value for you. I'll put in 4 hours, but I want you to put in 4 hours. You can't just expect me to come and spend a week of making a pitch and you sharing that brief with 10 companies and saying all of them will come and present to you. Oh, I'm that big special company where everybody should come and pitch. It's a very strange mindset, which is why I think it's not everybody's like that. I think 80% of our customers are still in India. There's some amazing people we work with. There is joy and celebration of doing that mutual side. But I think it's which is what I'm saying. I think whether it's for design, whether it's for agencies or design firms or any other kind of firms, the ecosystem isn't ready. I think it's going to take us a couple of years for that to evolve, and maybe all of us should do our bit to make that better.
Yeah. I mean, it's also another thing that I've noticed, and I think I wrote a LinkedIn post about it, and it was probably one of the most successful posts in terms of the views and impressions, where I just talked about why like agencies are building a community with each other? Why aren't they talking to each other? Is it the competition? Is it that they'll steal your clients or what? And a lot of people, got they agreed with me. I think it has to start from taking taking a whole level, like a holistic level of work together out there. And again, me, I think what I've also understand is that creating and putting out mediocre work is actually a choice. You can always do great work. Yeah. And I think in order to come out as as an agency who's trying to work with the clients that's important, that's valuable, you have to play with merit, right? You can't be doing stuff that's like mediocre and break your trust. Because the next time if they're gonna meet an agency, they're gonna come with a doubt. So it's not just 100% of the clients, it's also like
Yeah,
on the
I
other
think it's
side.
on their hands. They're not just being mean. I think half of the people that have that perception, they say, we burned their hands, we've burned their hands, we've burned their hands. We decided never again to work with an agency. And I was like, okay, who are these agencies you work with? Because I would have 99% people who are happy with what you've done.
Like in your case, I'm sure you are at a level where you are not, proving your work or pitching. How was it for you maybe in the beginning years? Was it just like, and I think you already mentioned that a lot of it was referral and there was already some sort of a trust.
See, I think until about 3 odd years back, we were very small for me to bother. I think we were 8 to 10 people then. At that size, uh, you don't need to, you're not trying to grow. Like basically, you don't have a demand supply skew. Like you don't need to make conscious efforts. Your referrals and your good work can keep you busy at that size, right? I think up to 8 to 10. So also, I think I've been recently transitioning last couple of years from a maker to an entrepreneur. I would say it's still in the making, and it's a slow transition that's just happening. Uh, until you're a maker, I never cared as much about like if you're able to pay the bills, if I'm able to take uh, like decent money home for myself, I was okay. I did not have big aspirations on uh, what kind of profitability you have or what kind of which on the hindsight I feel like is very very important. Uh, but I think that's the difference between a studio and an agency. Like I always say that we are a studio and not an agency. A studio is a bunch of passionate people who are far more craft focused. An agency is a setup where uh, you help people offer certain services, but it's very very optimized for cost efficiency, profits, margins, efficient business models, retainers, whatever that means, right? So we've been a studio, right? So as a studio, we would have had our struggles of maybe just meeting ends where I think in the first 1 or 2 years, maybe there would have been cases where I would not have uh, money to uh, pay the salary, something very common. But I don't think I've ever had any defaults. Yeah, I never differentiated between company money and personal money. So if the company doesn't have money for, maybe I still don't do as much, right? And maybe the stakes are much higher, but I don't differentiate that as much, right? Uh, so in that case, it did not affect us that much. But I think the focus was not for many years. I think it was 6, 7, 8 years. I was trying to learn. I was just trying to do a new experiment every other day, and it was a platform for me to experiment with new ways of working, and and uh, and the idea that money will follow, right? Uh, so
So, Robin, I think you just mentioned that for the longest time there was like a small team of like 8 to 10 people, uh, and I'm sure like you have to make sure that the kind of work you're putting out is top notch. How are you building teams? Like, were you finding people who are like super talented, or there were processes at place, or you had like a training system? What were the things that you were doing right?
Mary, I still don't find uh, ready talent at whatever level, whether it's a beginner or somebody with 3, 4, 5, 7 years of experience. I hardly find talent who can come in and start nailing it. even if their work come from some of the biggest companies in the market. And I think it's all been about very high benchmarks. Like what you were talking about, putting out good work. One of the values that we talk about is great, not goods. And maybe it's just being very relentless about those standards. I think we are at the process where we are in the last couple of years where we have made playbooks of how to coach people. We're getting better at it every other day. But if I just go back 2 or 3 years back, it's all been me working very very closely with people on projects, 1 or 2 assignments, and then they start imbibing and owning it, and being constantly trying better ways of working and evangelizing those processes. Like I said earlier in the conversation, that I don't think following a process is a function of how much time you have. Uh, uh, Cultivating better problem framing, evangelizing smarter ways of doing things is something that we've been at it for forever. I don't think there is structured learning that has led people to get there. Though that's something that we're trying to do now in the last couple of years. We like anybody new comes in, we have first 3 months is training on lots of different things, whether it's visual design, processes, everything. And that's for everyone at every level. And now we are extending into many other things, right? We are having coachings on leadership, client communication. I think we need to do more of that, because I don't think there are people who are ready to deliver what market needs on day one, irrespective of their background.
Yeah. I think we've talked about sprints number of times before this conversation. If you can, take us through like how you do it with your clients or even internally, like people who are listening, and maybe it can help them, as I think we've also talked about, since it's actually out there in the design community for a long time, but still like people are not aware, and like how effectively this can help them.
Sure. So I think many of us might know design sprint. When I say design sprint, it can be used loosely, but I'm talking about the Google Ventures design sprint that Jake Knapp evangelized, and there's a book called Sprint which talks about it's a 5-day process where you go from a big challenge to a validated prototype in 5 days. So you start with the bigger problem, explore a couple of solutions, prototype it, recruit 5 people, test it all in a week. And it's really suited for starting something new when you're kicking off a new product or project, or when you're working on solving something that's really complex and you don't know where to start. You don't know what to solve because it seems like too big of a puzzle to crack. Often happens with large companies also, and often with startups as well. Like it's a common problem. And I think the problem that happens is that people typically work in silos, right? There's a lot that's there in individual heads that they're not able to bring together, or something gets diluted between in the process of going from strategy to execution, right? So what we do is we bring cross-platform experts together. Let's say there's somebody heading sales, customer support, marketing, tech. Can we get them to sit in the same room and work on solving a problem, keeping their constraints and realities of today aside? Because often what blocks people from thinking, and I think very few people understand that really, especially in the kind of customers we work with, is that it doesn't cost you much to dream and imagine. And you have to be able to separate when you're trying to play in the vision zone or trying to think of solving problems that you can't solve tomorrow, versus being in an incremental zone where you're trying to solve for something that you want to, where your resources, what can we ship next week, right? And both are very different states of working, and both are great for the respective purposes. Like design sprints are relevant where I'm trying to figure out something where I can solve a problem and conceptualize a solution which can come together possibly 6 months down the line, where I'm trying to think something very fundamental there. Start a new product, rethink something fundamentally, right? And And they're just bringing team together, creating their calendars, all the 100 meetings that we have, and say, I'm going to focus on these couple of days to go through a structured step-by-step process to and get hands-on at the entire process where everybody, right from the CEO to a designer to a customer support person, uh, gets down, sketches their vision of the product, takes informed bets, takes decisions together on what they want to build. Ends up being very powerful. I often used to think that I want to be the best designer in the room, but when I run sprints, I feel like I need to facilitate this group to come up with really good solutions. And I often don't even make my solutions. My job is completely focused on how can I empower them, facilitate them to come up with solutions. And we convince these customers and teams to say, go big, be bold, try to work on keep your constraints aside on what's your tech debt and how many resources you have. We're trying to think of solving this problem, and we bring in the constraints later, right? And we say that this decision on whatever we commit in prototype is valid only for a week. We're not committing for year. So we lower the stakes significantly. Let's decide, let's validate, let's learn, and then take informed decisions. So lowering the stakes for decision making is a big part of design sprint. So you say, let's get a week, get something out. We're not committing big resources to it. Let's get some inputs from users, what they're liking, what they're not, what's working. Do some iterations on that. And that will help you move forward with confidence. I think it's a little abstract. I'm just trying to understand how much of what I'm sharing you're able to get it. Happy to drill down on what will happen.
No, got the idea. You took us through very well and very specific. So what I and thanks for taking us through, Robin. I think it was it's basically I think what I've learned from doing design sprint is that you are just trying to uplift your clients and like people you're working with, and like
Their maturity levels.
in a way where so I also feel that a lot of this process is just like like a back and forth of spreading awareness and like talking about things that they've been missing out. I mean, this is from my own learnings, and I'm definitely like every time I do it, there's some one or the other thing. It's also like taking a lot out of a mystery box. I think when you do this when you do sprints, I think a lot comes out that's maybe not clear in the beginning. Is that also common?
100% all the time. I have seen founders fight about their vision so many times.
Yeah.
I talk about what do you want to do in 2 years, and both the founders are like, no, this is not what you want to do. And it's very surprising that I'm working with a team, and the team is often not even aligned on what they want to do in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So there is always very big difference of opinions that comes out. Strategy changes, roadmaps change, priorities change, everything changes in a sprint.
Yeah.
I feel like it's valuable 10x more than what they pay for.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not even design. It's like a business design of sorts. I think it works in like all the departments, right? And not just design or like building the product. It's majorly the vision, right? And everything just follows, which is amazing. And this is what I've also felt. And I think the someone who has done like a lot of sprints, they foresee a lot of things as well. Because I've worked with people like you, like who've done so much, and they kind of foresee it. Is that happened with you as well?
Foreseeing what's going to happen in the sprint?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, this could come out of this, and like, maybe like foreseeing.
So before the sprint, on the Friday, the sprint starts on Monday typically. On a Friday, we do our internal prep. And I brief the team that today we're gonna foresee what's gonna happen in the sprint. What kind of problems they will come up with, what kind of solutions can they expect, who's gonna say what's gonna happen. And we go with a prep where we have already thought about the big problems that are going to be solved, what kind of inspiration to bring in. We have a sense of what's going to come out, like a very hazy sense of what's going to come out. But I think that points to one very interesting aspect. The biggest value of a sprint is alignment. Because what stops people from doing things often is they all have a different vision of what they want to do or what they perceive as problems. And it's not like they come up with some mind-blowing stuff that uh, they've never thought about. Somebody has a thought about that in bits and pieces. Uh, and there are ideas that have just been floating around for many, many years, disconnected, scattered, without clarity. They just all come together. And like you said, sometimes I could foresee that.
Yeah. So this is the next question I'm gonna ask is about business and about the trends that I've been seeing. A lot of agencies are trying to come up with their own products or their own brands. That's where I'm coming. I think you also started doing something. And why do you think agencies needs to do that?
I don't think we should do that.
And what? Tell us about your journey doing that.
So I think trying to, I think it's just about the ecosystem. Plays a very heavy role on our minds. Even as founders running agencies, sometimes it plays on our mind where we feel like building a product is really cool. And that's I think that's far more prevalent in our ecosystem than this. But building a product is cool. Running an agency or running a studio is not that cool. And when you have more resource, you have bigger teams, you have more resources, you have a bit of money, and then sometimes if you're a smart design leader or a product person, you will always have interesting problems you are able to see, especially when you work with so many customers.
Yeah.
You have new ideas coming in every other week or month.
Plus, you have access to like so many different.
You could see. You could
softwares.
see. I think you could see the entire market from a front row seats where you're going to see what's going to happen. Like you're working with a client who comes to you with a problem. Whether you work with them or not, you know what people are thinking. Every sales conversation is an insight into what kind of product actually they're building and they're trying to solve. When you work with the customer and how they're launching products, what's working with them, what's not working, you're learning with them.
Yeah.
So I see that design firms specifically almost see the product equal or better than how a VC sees it, where you're seeing what's happening in a particular industry, how are things changing, right? And that's something that you always are able to see. And then you have new ideas that, oh, what if we did this? This is going to be game changing, right? And then sometimes many of us say, okay, this is a running business. It's paying me well. I have customers. I'm making decent money. I have a comfortable life. But what if I build this product? That's a curiosity, or I would say, you get itch that you get to build something, and people go in that direction. I feel it's a really terrible idea because there have been very, very, very few success stories of people having been able to navigate that. If you want to do it, you shut down your business, you sell it off, commit to it 100% and build it. I think we were relatively successful. We were trying to build a AI analytics product back in 2022 before this was a thing. And we bootstrapped it. We built it internally. We had our own tech team. We had 5-6 good customers that we were working with. We did 5 odd pivots before I moved out. I think after, my earlier co-founder, he took it forward, and there'll be many more pivots. We're still figuring out what that product PMF looks like. But I think you get distracted. Is the first thing that I feel. You get distracted. You kind of compromise on the kind of effort you're able to do into nurturing your team, how you can grow. So it's just about clarity and going all in, right? You're clear you want to build something, commit to it, go all in. Don't step on 2 boats at the same time. It's just not going to lead you anywhere, right? That's what. Just because you have a good design team, you have some resources, you have the money. So you say, let me do this on the side. Good companies are not built on side. They need a lot of focus, mind space, attention. And for anybody trying to do that, I would just say, You want to do it? Go all in. Otherwise, don't do it. And stop doing it just because you think it's cool. The reality is, and what something never gets talked about in the especially tech and product ecosystem, is that 98-99% of companies fail and shut down, and it's hard. So again, we started the conversation with the whole point of delusion, and again, I'm just coming back to the same thing. Yeah, another delusion. So, and the unfortunate reality is we all know that this was a delusion only when it did not work out.
Yeah.
Until then, everybody feels like, yeah, most people have not been successful doing it, but I'll be able to do this. I'll be that one outlier who's gonna kind of navigate these two boats and make this happen.
It's about how long you can be delusional.
How long can you be delusional?
Yeah.
And how long can you have the money to support that delusion?
Yeah. I think it's like since like it has become, it was never very like so easy to like build products, come up with new tools and do stuff internally than now. And now I think, but I think a lot of fundamentals doesn't change. That's like, just go all in one product and try to do one thing.
Yeah, it's easier.
Yeah, it's easier that, and again, I mean, I have limited experience with my business, and I like every day I'm learning one or the other thing new. It's like it's a constant learning, and what I think I love about this journey is that what I was 3 months ago, I'm a totally different person, and I'm gonna be a totally different person, in next 3 months. What are the? I mean, this is a little off topic, but what's your take on entrepreneurship and people who's trying to start their own thing?
Do it, you'll learn faster. I think don't do it assuming it's gonna work. Do it for the learning. Do it for the thrill. Like treat it like an adventure. Do it for the thrill of it. I think people who have done it, see, you have to go through the grind in life. If you pursue entrepreneurship, you most likely, unless you are like exceptionally lucky, 1% chance. 99% of us are gonna go through a lot of grind, and the earlier we go through that grind, the better and wiser, mature, intelligent professionals we become. So do it for the opportunity to accelerate your learning curve. Whatever you're going to learn in 10 years, if you build a company for a couple of years, you're going to become that person who's as wiser in 4 years, right? So yeah, but you're going to possibly lose a lot of hair very early in your career. That's it. So you should be okay with that.
Yeah.
But you're gonna grow wiser sooner in your life, and do it for that. And I think it's the best time for people to build something. Like you said, it's so easy. I'm seeing with so many of our customers and people that are interacting, 4 people, 5 people teams are building amazing companies. Right? You don't need like a 20 people team to build something, right? So it's great times to build stuff and start a company. We should do that.
Yeah. I think this podcast can go on for another 2 hours. And I feel this deserves a round two as well. And again, that takes us to the end of the conversation. And I really want to ask you, Robin, what are the things that you are looking forward to in terms of your business, the kind of journey you want to have moving in the future? What's there for Parallel, for you and your like your team?
Somebody should build an ID or metal app from India. I would love for that to be us. Right. So that's what I think there's a lot of other things to do for the ecosystem. I think this ecosystem maturity that we have discussed multiple times in this conversation, we all owe to make that happen. And I think that's something that I really look forward to seeing how I can do my bit, what Parish can do its bit. What I'm really looking forward to as a professional, I think these are one of the most interesting times as a designer, where it's like that once in a decade or two moment where how you interact with technology is being redefined. And I think there will be a big opportunity to uh, learn and crack new patterns, new ways of working, how we work together and collaborate, how we solve problems, what do we build together. And I think next 6 months to 1 year might shape up a lot of that. So my number one focus is to just experiment with not just building stuff and products we build, but experiment on how do we collaborate, how do we build, uh, how do job roles evolve, uh, and that's really really exciting for me at this point of time.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for a banging conversation, Robin. I hope you had a good one, and I'll catch you very soon.
I really really enjoyed this, Deepak, and hope there were certain things that could be of value.
Yeah, it was a banger one for sure.